This segment of Armed American Radio is being brought to you by the Gun Owners of America, America's no-compromise gun lobby. Become a member today. Visit gunowners.org. Join them, folks. I did. Welcome back to this segment being sponsored by the Gun Owners of America. One of my favorite all-time guests, a gentleman we have a lot of fun with, but get very serious with, because this is very serious business. There are well-funded people trying to take away your freedoms. And that's the Gun Owners of America there to help stop it. They support this program, and you need to support them as well, too. Take a listen to this. This is how serious it is. This is coming from Michael Bloomberg, billionaire Bloomberg. That's why we took this on, he says. But the NRA and even more right-wing organizations like Gun Owners of America are so against anything because they think it's a slippery slope. Gun control he's referring to. I think if there was an issue of could you have your own nuclear bomb, they might say, well, we should not have a law against that. Joining me is the executive director of the Gun Owners of America, Larry Pratt. Larry, what do you think when you hear garbage like that from Bloomberg?
I think the mayor just needs to find out what America is all about, and he needs to learn what the Second Amendment in particular is talking about. And very clearly from the context of the debates at the time that the amendment was adopted, at the time that the Militia Act in the 1790s was put on the federal books, not long after, by the way, the final ratification of the Bill of Rights and the Second Amendment. The whole idea was that every individual man of militia age be armed, and that we were actually required at that time to own a military long gun. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, but we have a Second Amendment to protect ourselves from precisely people like you.
Well said. In fact, take a listen to what he says. In the interview, Larry, because he mentioned you, I want to spend some more time with this. I mean, he mentioned your organization, so clearly you are having an impact. And a question from Rolling Stone is, what's it like to be essentially the public face of stricter gun regulation? Do you get a lot of hate mail? And he says, yeah, you get every once in a while a bad letter, but a lot of people will say thanks for what you're doing on guns. Now, keep in mind, my friends and the people that I meet tend to be not rural hunters. But I have a lot of friends who are hunters, and they think I'm right on this. They want to keep their guns, and I don't have a problem with that. Of course, he's referring to hunting, which we all know the Second Amendment ain't about. Your comments?
You betcha. Mr. Mayor, you are talking about something that really the Second Amendment has nothing to do with. I would submit that hunting is one of those unenumerated rights protected by the Ninth Amendment. The Second Amendment is designed to point guns at the government to keep it from drifting into a tyrannical direction. And it was used back at the Battle of Athens. I think the year was 1946, as World War II was coming to an end. Veterans returning to Athens, Tennessee, found their town totally controlled, the politicians and the police alike, by a bunch of corruptocrats. And they decided that when the forthcoming elections were taking place, they knew for certain what was going to happen, and when indeed the voting boxes were literally stolen and hauled into the police station so they could be miscounted, in came the militia, riding in pickup trucks and every other kind of vehicle to get their hands on. They surrounded the police station. A few shots were fired, and the police realized this wasn't going to end well, and they came out with a white flag. And then the votes were counted, and lo and behold, the bad guys had lost. Fast forward to the Bundy Ranch in Bunkerville, Nevada, not very many weeks ago, and the BLM was pointing guns at a rancher as a way of collecting a debt. You know, we have courts for that, guys. Well, happily, since the sheriff of the county he'd worked with the BLM and these other federal agencies for years and years and years, and he just didn't want to stand up to them. He finally did at the end, but that was when the end had already been determined. And so out came the militia. They initially weren't under the sheriff's authority, which was a pity, but hey, you got to do what you got to do, and they kept the BLM at bay. And finally the sheriff sent a deputy out to the BLM agents who were pointing guns at cowboys and cowgirls, unarmed, riding to the corral to open it to free the cattle that had been stolen by the government. Turned out they weren't even going to sell the cattle to satisfy what they claimed Bundy owed them. They were just going to kill them and put them in big pits that they'd already dug. And so when the sheriff's deputy rode up, he said, "Do you guys really want to be known as the ones who mowed down unarmed men and women?" And that question apparently pierced their heart. They stood down and rode away. Now, I think we're looking at something somewhat comparable that's about to happen down near Laredo, where illegals are flooding into our country, and the Border Patrol has been strategically placed 40 miles from the border. I mean, come on, Barack.
He didn't know that. Give him a break. He said he didn't know that.
No,
he's only the president. He didn't know
things out, Mark, is when
he's just as surprised as everyone else, Larry. and there'll be a 30-day investigation, and it wouldn't be proper to comment.
Well, it looks like the Laredo sector, actually they're coming across in a little town. In English, it's the ebony trees, Los Ebanos, and I'm sure it completely overwhelms any kind of police presence that's there in that desert little town sector. And so the flood is just incredible. Texas Rangers have been put on the border, but I'm hopeful that the militia will be able to organize. People are talking about, if they can, putting down their jobs, at least taking time off and going down there and putting themselves in a very dangerous situation, because the president is clearly in cahoots with what's going on.
It would appear that way. It certainly appears that way.
And we know that in a de facto sense, the presidents of Mexico and Guatemala have declared war against the United States. They have signed an agreement that they will... Normally, they have very strict immigration laws. And in Mexico, if you're there without a visa, you're in jail. And they've signed an agreement to let folks come through virtually as if the buses might have something like illegal express. And if that's what's going on, then they're going to get a free ride right up to our border, where they'll be disgorged at some point. That's an act of war. And I would have first of all, the first thing I would do in response is to send in a SEAL team and take out Sergeant Tamaresi from the Mexican jail that he's being held in, because the poor guy made a wrong turn at a border crossing and ended up in Mexico with 3 firearms in his trunk.
I'll tell you, you talk about what this administration did for that kid is they gave him. He's a Marine reservist now, because he's back from deployment, returned back to the reserve roles, but he was a drilling Marine. They created a legal drill for him, not his unit, right? And anybody who's listening who's in the reserves knows that if you have a toothache or you have to wash your hair, there are ways of getting out of a weekend drill, believe me.
10 seconds, brother, 10 seconds.
And they drummed him out. When he missed that drill, they drummed him out. They took away his Marine status. They discharged him while he's in jail rather than free him.
I know that. That is...
We will hold on to that thought, guys. We'll continue that when we come back with Larry Pratt and Neil McKay, back right after this. Larry, let me set up this question and turn this over to you. Tell me why you're still fighting for better gun laws even after leaving office as mayor. And Bloomberg says, I and the foundation are trying to save lives. Particularly, I want the foundation to focus on things that other people aren't focusing on. Guns are another one of those things that nobody was willing to take on. 12,000 people get killed with handguns every single year. And then he goes to another question. You made reducing the number of weapons on the streets in New York a priority when you were mayor. Did you learn any lessons about which policies worked best? And he said this: because almost all murders are young minority males killing young minority males. It's like 90%. Take out domestic violence. After that, there's nothing left. So we go back to both questions. 12,000 people get killed with handguns, and then over in another question, he admits it's black-on-black or gang-related inner-city violence. What the hell does Salem, Ohio have to do with that?
It's hard to see how he's trying to connect the dots, but then logic has not been a strong suit of our opponents. They clearly think in a different way. They think with their emotions. And if guns disturb them, if they're not comfortable around somebody they think might have a concealed firearm, then they don't want that person around. They don't want them to be able to carry a gun. The fact that all the two of our mass murders have occurred in gun-free zones doesn't faze these folks. They just don't like guns, and they don't want us to have one either, even though they cannot make an argument from linear logic that the facts are on their side, because they're not.
So you would agree with me that their ultimate goal is to take away guns?
I don't know about some of the folks down at the PTA meeting or the Concerned Women Voters or something like that, but I think Mr. Bloomberg knows bloody well what he's up to. He wants to bring tyranny to this country. The guy that wants to tell you how many ounces of soda you can drink, I happen to agree with his idea in principle, but if somebody wants to be stupid, well, this is America. You can do that. And it's not his job to get in there and be their nanny. And the fact that if he will stoop so low as to deal with somebody's big gulp, then obviously he wants to control it all.
Well, I've always gotten a kick out of him going after sugar and, trans fats and everything, while standing on the podium when he was mayor, welcoming everybody to the hot dog eating contest. I always got a kick out of that, where Joey Chestnut, or whatever his name is going to shove 67 hot dogs down his throat in 10 minutes, but it's just a one-time thing. Well, it's not for Joey Chestnut. He eats like that for a living.
With all those, there's some dangerous chemicals in hot dogs. That's probably why they're so delicious. And
it's exactly why they're so delicious.
So
it's why the second one and third one taste better than the first. Can I have another one of those with kraut and mustard, please?
Exactly.
I've always said the guy with the dirtiest fingernails and the dirtiest water under the umbrella with the steam coming up from the subway grate in Manhattan is definitely good. That's the hot dog I want, okay? And I want to park next to him in my Dodge Ram pickup truck.
Did you hear that, Mayor Bloomberg? Some of us actually like what you hate. In fact, we love to like what you hate. It really makes our day.
I'd like to roll some coal at the mayor's motorcade. Anyway, here's what he said about smoking. He said, "It's like smoking. I've always defended your right to smoke. I think you're crazy, but I don't think we should take away your right. I do think we should take away your right to smoke where other people have to breathe your smoke. But if you go outside away from everyone else, I don't have a problem with that. And if you want to have a gun in your house, I think you're pretty stupid, particularly if you have kids. But I guess you have a right to do that. I guess you have a right to do that." He doesn't have a problem with that.
Of him, willing to make such an important concession. Guess what, Mayor? You keep pointing your guns at us, and we have a right to respond accordingly.
Well, that's an extremist message, isn't it?
But, this is the same president who joked that there was crack cocaine in the White House pastries.
Right.
It was a week and a half ago.
A joke like that wouldn't even occur to most of us. So I think that tells us something about what the Chum Gang fellow is thinking about a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is an administration that has looked the other way as marijuana use is going off the charts, and we can argue about the right and wrong of marijuana, but I will tell you that there's a lot of parents listening today who are concerned about their kids flunking out of high school or bombing in an SAT, and they don't appreciate the President of the United States basically encouraging their kids to smoke pot. I mean, that's crazy town.
Well, you know what?
That's the world we live in.
He has a reason for doing that, because he knows that typically people tend to be more, hey, man, chilled out when they're on the marijuana. And that's the way the president wants the whole country. Chilled out, dependent on him, doing what he says to do, and people not having any other idea, not having the energy or the will to resist, because he's got us all doped up. That's the way he likes it.
Was that a vision that you've just granted us of what it's like when Larry Pratt is high?
No, I think it's a perception of what it's like when the president is high.
Oh, sorry.
with a horse head.
You know, it's ironic because we're not going to have enough time, and I wish we did. Yeah, and there comes the music. I was going to go into Holder blasting Palin over impeachment, over Obama impeachment call, and some of the comments that Holder made relative to what people think about this president. Can you guess that he said it was racist? Imagine that.